Welcome everyone. We're going to begin the webinar on 2016 OSHA deadlines for body shops. I'm Melissa Jolls with RDA Impact, and Brandon Thomas, Chief Operating Officer for GMG EnviroSafe, is your presenter for this webinar. The presentation will take approximately 20 minutes, and then we'll have time for questions. And we are recording it, and we'll post it on our YouTube channel shortly. So if you do have questions, you can type those at the chat box at the bottom right of your screen, and Brandon will answer them at the end of the presentation. Now I'm going to turn it over to Brandon.
Thank you for that introduction, Melissa. Hope everyone's having a good day. Thanks for taking the time to join us. As Melissa said, we've got a quick update on some regulatory changes that occurred several years ago, but are now closing the loop, and will be coming up and have another deadline rapidly approaching here in the next 60 days for all body shops in the United States. If you've never been on a call before with me, I just want to give you a quick update on my bio as well as the company. I cut my teeth in the collision repair industry working for an MSO called Collision Revision. We had 30 locations in Illinois, Indiana, and Florida. And I've been working with GMG EnviroSafe for about 5 years now. GMG EnviroSafe as a company, we handle EPA, OSHA, and DOT compliance, and we've been doing that since 1989. We have been focused on the collision repair industry during that entire time, and I'm happy to report that we are currently servicing every state in the United States. So, as a quick refresher, OSHA updated their hazard communication standard in 2012. The hazard communication standard has been the #1 or #2 standard that was issued for citations, penalties, and inspections for body shops. So it is a high area of visibility for OSHA when they're working with body shops around the country. It had not been updated in nearly 20 years. The last update occurred in 1994. And when they made the update to hazard communication in 2012, they were looking to accomplish a few things. They wanted to update the classification process for chemicals and their hazards. They wanted to create some harmonization between words and pictures on their labels, so that it would be easier for your technicians and painters to use those chemicals in a safe manner. And they also wanted to bring some standardization of the language and formatting to safety data sheets, or MSDS at the time. And then finally, they wanted to make this consistent with international standards. You'll see the term GHS, or Global Harmonized System. That really is where this is coming into play, where a manufacturer that's working or selling chemicals in many different countries would only have one set of rules instead of having to do something 20 different ways. So if you were on my webinar from a couple years ago, we talked about this first key date for body shops. Because the regulatory change occurred in 2012 and was going to take a couple of years to phase into, body shops around the country had to do training in 2013 to explain to their employees what the changes were going to look like, what the labels were going to change to, so that they could be prepared to handle those chemicals as the manufacturer started to phase out the old MSDS and bring in the new SDS. We've had a lull for the last couple of years where there hasn't really been any activity for the body shops in 2014 or 2015, because all of the work was really on the manufacturer or distributor side. And you'll see on the screen there that manufacturers were required to ship new safety data sheets with chemicals and phase out all of their MSDS by the end of last year. So now, like I said earlier, we're closing the loop. It is now time for the employers, which are all the body shops, to meet the deadline for June 1st, 2016 to switch all of their programs over to the safety data sheet model. So there's 3 key points in terms of what do you need to do if you're a body shop by June 1st of this year to make sure that you're compliant with the Hazard Communication Standard of 2012. First step is you need to replace all of your MSDS with the new SDS. The way to do this would be to organize the chemicals that you're purchasing, whether you've got a list or you can take an inventory by walking through your facility. And then you'll need to contact the chemical manufacturer or distributor to get those new safety data sheets. Now, for the most part, chemical manufacturers have been ahead of the game on this because they wanted to cut down the telephone traffic. And instead, what they've been doing is just posting them on the website. I'm sure most of you guys are familiar with paint companies' websites and being able to get them there. But a lot of the other smaller suppliers, detail chemicals, things like that, are found on the manufacturer's websites now as well. The key thing is for you to go out there, find out what chemicals it is that you're using in your shop, and find the newest SDS form, download it, and then keep it readily accessible for your staff and make sure they know how to access it. One of the things that we come across is, how do you know a document is an SDS versus an MSDS? There are still many, many examples of manufacturers still using MSDS, and they did not update to the SDS, or they have not met their deadline. So when you're downloading these forms, it's important that you're downloading the correct one. There's also manufacturers that have kept the MSDS and the SDS on their website, so if you were to select the wrong document, you wouldn't be compliant. So safety data sheets have to have 16 sections. MSDS could have 10, 12, 14, or 16. For it to be compliant with an SDS, it must have 16. There'll be a publication or revision date that's occurred within the last 3 or 4 years, because again, this was a regulatory change from 2012. And then it'll have SDS, or safety data sheet, in the header. You also might see GHS, which is the Global Harmonized System. I have an example to show you here. This is from Refinish Distributors Alliance. This is their primer surfacer product. Looking at the screen, you can see that they have safety data sheet in the header. We also have a revision date within the last several years, June 18th, 2015. And if I go to the end of that document, looking at page 12, it'll skip down and I can see just a little bit of scrolling that I've got my 16 sections in my date of preparation of June 19th, 2015. So if you are working with a chemical manufacturer and you are downloading their files, please make sure that you're confirming that you're getting the correct one by making sure that you have 16 sections and that it is the most current safety data sheet. What happens if a manufacturer doesn't have an SDS? There are a lot of examples out there with manufacturers that they have not yet updated at all, whether they don't know there's a regulatory change or they're not making that update. Or there is a more common example where a manufacturer has so many chemicals, someone that's doing tens of thousands of chemicals, and they just haven't been able to update every single one of them. OSHA has not provided any extensions, but they have offered up that they would give manufacturers some leeway if they've shown a good faith effort to update their documents. What that means is if there's a manufacturer that has 20,000 products and they've updated, let's say, 15,000 of them, and the other 5,000 will be done in the next 3 to 4 months, OSHA will take that into consideration and may be fine with that. However, on your side of things, you still need to be, if you're a shop, making sure that you have the due diligence and the documentation in order. So when you attempt to contact the manufacturer, if you notice that the document that you have is an MSDS only and is not the new SDS format, you'll want to make a note of the date that you attempted to retrieve that safety data sheet from the manufacturer, and you want to find out from the manufacturer when they expect the SDS will be available. I'd recommend keeping some type of a file or a note with all of those examples, so that in the event that you had an OSHA inspection or they requested some type of documentation and they noticed that you didn't have the SDS, you could show that it's not publicly available yet and you've done the due diligence and you've made a good faith effort to obtain that document as well. The second thing, you will need to update the secondary container labeling to meet the new standards in the shop. And when we're talking about secondary container labeling, we're talking about spray bottles, the ketchup squeeze bottles, pump sprayers or Sure Shot cans, metal quart cans with lacquer thinner in them, as well as paint liners and cups. And you may have some more examples of there as well. But the key thing is the chemical classification process has changed within OSHA. So if you have a spray bottle labeled with a particular chemical in it, and it looks like the example on the screen, and through that change of the classification process, some of those warnings have changed, the shop is responsible for updating their labeling. So what I would recommend is that the owner of the business or the shop manager, whoever is accountable for this, does a shop walk, looks at their inventory of secondary containers, all those bottles and examples that you see on there, and you confirm that there's 3 pieces of information on that container: the name of the manufacturer, the name of the product, and some type of a hazard warning. That could be written on there, it could be a pre-printed label, it could be taped on there, just as long as if I was to walk up to it or an OSHA inspector was to walk up to it, they're able to identify what the chemical hazard is and the contents of that container. If you need help finding the information, what number do I put down for the red box? What number do I put down for the yellow box? You'll want to consult the safety data sheet. I'm going to scroll back a few slides to show you that example again. if I go back to my primer surfacer example, and I go to page 2 and scroll a little bit, you'll see that right in the document, they have the classification system for National Fire Protection as well as the hazardous material identification system. The numbers are the same. So if your containers are not labeled and you need help in knowing where to put that, you can use the safety data sheet to fill in that gap. So step 1, get the safety data sheets. Step 2, update your labeling. Step 3 is to communicate to your employees any new physical or health hazards. Again, the chemical classification process has changed. So let's say rubbing compound was previously categorized as a level 1 health hazard, and with the new rules, it's now a level 3. You have to have some accountability there and some documentation that shows that you've communicated that to your employees. So as you're getting these new safety data sheets, you should be reviewing them to determine what the chemical hazards are, and then putting together some type of a training program that you can review with whoever are your employees that are using those chemicals. My recommendation would be to complete all of your SDS inventory first, and then go through that inventory to make a training class with whomever is handling those chemicals at one time. If you were to obtain all of your paint products and get those SDS and then train the staff, and then get all of your body fillers and then review it and then train, and then all your detail chemicals, if you do that in phases, it's going to end up being much more burdensome and time consuming than if you get all the first 2 steps done and then you move on to the training component. Those 3 things need to be completed by every body shop by June 1st, 2016. Documentation is very, very important of all of those in terms of training registers, who attended, what date did it occur, and what was covered. But a lot of times I get the question, especially when the deadline is as close, is there an easy way for shops to be compliant and meet this deadline? And I'm happy to report that the answer is yes. So as I said earlier, GMG EnviroSafe, we are the largest environmental health and safety company dedicated exclusively to body shops. We have expert team members around the country that focus on very challenging issues, whether that's a shop that needs help permitting their business or submitting an annual report to the state. If there's been a citation or inspection, we work with the regulatory agencies to review and do settlements or negotiations. And the key thing based on the current conference call is the chemical inventory management piece. We have a team of individuals that will build the chemical inventories based on the chemicals that are being used in the shop, all paint, body filler, glaze, rubbing compound, detail chemicals, whatever it is, we have an inventory for that, and we manage the safety data sheet component of that. In addition, we do ongoing safety training by our field staff, where we'll come out and do quarterly inspections, annual training classes, especially to meet the hazard communication requirement here in the next 60 days, as well as monthly safety meetings. The one thing that I did want to show you in terms of what's an available resource for you if you wanted some additional assistance and didn't want to do the legwork to obtain the safety data sheets. All of our customers are set up with a customer portal where our staff will load for them the safety data sheets based on what chemicals that they are using. I've set up a test facility that I can show you that. So this is an example fake facility known as Impact Shop number 1. When logging in, our customers have access to all the gauges and indicators and where they're currently at. They have an action plan of any issues they're currently facing, anything that needs to be resolved in the facility. However, the thing that I wanted to highlight is the chemical inventory or safety data sheet component. We integrate all of the chemicals and all the safety data sheets from the manufacturers directly into each customer's dashboard, to where all we need to know is what chemicals are in the shop, and we'll automatically assign them to the profile, and you'll have access to any of them 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, from any internet accessible device. All of this can be sorted, searched for, and updated in real time. And if you, again, let's say you needed to access this clear coat from RDA, you would be able to view that document, print it, email it, whatever you needed to do with that, if you needed to provide it to an inspector or to your employees in the event of an emergency. Closing this and going back. So in terms of the safety data sheet component specifically, we have a team that are dedicated to just safety data sheets. We have a database of more than 30,000 chemicals specific to the body shop industry, and we're updating that about 250 to 300 every week, where these safety data sheets are being posted automatically. You would be able to enroll in our services and have a solution where all of the legwork is already done for you. We just need to know what chemicals need to be added to your facility, and you would have the SDS automatically ready to go. In the event that you had an inspection or some type of on-call need, whether that was an emergency consultation, some type of a citation, that sort of thing, we also provide those services as well. So, how much does it cost to add GMG EnviroSafe compliance department to my shop? We have several different pricing options for our compliance department, depending on the size of the facility and how frequently you wanted us on site. But the price range is $49 to $299 per month. There are a lot of moving pieces. There are a couple of options in between those plans. But if that price range to you sounds like something that might make sense, instead of you doing the legwork to hit this June 1st deadline, I've got my contact information here, both my email address and telephone. So please feel free to reach out to me for more details, and we can find a program that's going to be the best fit for your shop. With that, I'd like to thank you for your time and open it up to questions to see if I can help give you some more information.
Okay, we have a question here, Brandon. Do you have an example of the employee training program? Any paperwork that the employees can be given?
I do. If the person that asked the question or anyone else that would be interested in that would send me an email, we can set up I don't have access to it right now in the system, and I don't want to tie up the call for that, but we'd be able to show you what the training materials look like within our program and how we would go about it. The key highlights would be going over how OSHA classifies the chemicals. So what is the difference between a flammable product and a combustible product? What is the difference between a cancer-causing chemical versus an irritant? And then what are the types of chemicals that fall into those categories? So if I am a buffer and I'm coming into contact with rubbing compounds as well as glazes and maybe some detail chemicals as well, the shop would need to communicate when you're handling these chemicals, this is the type of safety equipment you need to be wearing because this is the risk. So if you're handling a rubbing compound, you need to have glasses, gloves, and a respirator because that chemical can get into your body and lead to long-term cancers or health issues. So again, as a recap, email me and I'll get you more information, but from a high level, you need to go through the different types of chemicals that someone is coming into contact with and the precautions they need to be taking when they're handling them.
Okay, also, just to let everybody know on the call, I'll follow up by sending everybody your information as well. And that individual will follow up with you, Brandon. Here's another question. Does OSHA require a shop to have a hard copy of their SDS sheets readily available in case of an emergency, or is a digital solution acceptable?
OSHA has accepted digital and or electronic solutions since the mid-90s, back when fax services were much more predominant than what they are today. So the OSHA requirement is readily accessible. That does not mean paper. The key thing is that if you are going to have a web-based solution, like what I showed you earlier, that your employees are trained on how to access that. So when we're working with our customers, not only are we training each individual and having those technicians sign off that they know how to access that information, we also put up posters throughout all the departments and break rooms so that if an inspector was to walk in and say, well, how do I get to this information? There are signs up that communicate that to where they can access that information right away. The one caveat is there are some fire departments, municipal city level fire departments around the country. There aren't many of them anymore, but I am aware of a few that still want paper copies. And in that instance, the documents can be printed and organized in a binder. A lot of times we'll talk to those fire departments and we'll just email them all of the safety data sheets and they'll print them on their side, and that way they have access to them. But OSHA does not require paper copies.
Okay. Any other questions? I don't have any yet. Please feel free to type them in the chat box and we'll. You're just so thorough, Brandon.
Try to anticipate the questions that I'm going to get.
Yeah. Well, if there are no more questions, again, we'll follow up with Brandon's information to everybody. We did record this, and we will put it on our website. Here's another question. Let's see. It says, this one says, paint suits approved. Has anything been published yet?
So this was dealing with an isocyanate spray suit issue that occurred, I think, January of last year. There were a couple of articles written about it in Repair Driven News, as well as, I believe, Bender, a body shop business. There have been 7 different manufacturers that have released documentation that shows that they met a certain standard, which was the F903. If you wanted that documentation in terms of what the manufacturers have released, in terms of what suits have met that standard or from their product line, I've compiled all of that. So if you send me an email, I can send you what the manufacturers have sent me, and you can see if that's a spray suit that you're currently using, or if you wanted to contact your manufacturer of whichever one you are using, and you can ask them to produce additional documentation on that. So yeah, we've got about 7 manufacturers that have provided some documents on it.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, I think we'll have people follow up individually if they have questions. That'll conclude the webinar today. Brandon, we really appreciate it, and everybody who attended. And we'll send you the link for the YouTube library so you guys can refer back to it. Or if you know somebody who missed it and wants to see it, you can send them the link. We appreciate everybody's time, and we'll let you know about future training opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brandon.